from your local election headquarters. This is Big Country Politics on KTAB.
Welcome back to Big Country Politics. We are joined by Michael Redden, who is CEO of New Horizons here in Abilene. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome, Travis. Thanks for having me.
Victor, but close enough.
Sorry.
Close enough. So we wanted to talk to you about, because Travis and I, our news director, went over to New Horizons last week and toured the facility. And it's kind of tucked away in the back over on East Highway 80. And not a lot of people know that it's there, but it's a very nice facility. Tell us what New Horizons is and what you guys do.
Yes, thanks. We're very fortunate to have the facility that we have here in Abilene called the Audrey Grace House. The Audrey Grace House, as you mentioned, is tucked away just off Highway 80 on the old Diamond Lake. And we had the opportunity about 10 years ago to purchase 4.5 acres from the city where Audrey Grace House currently sits, and then a little later got the opportunity to buy the property that includes the lake from the private owner.
Very nice property.
So, it's a beautiful place.
Yeah.
And as we continue to improve, it really is turning into a nice place. Audrey Grace House specifically is a residential treatment center. Our focus at Audrey Grace House is working predominantly with kids that are from the foster care system that are at the highest level of need. And when I say need, we're talking about kids that are removed from their home because of abuse and neglect, and because of the trauma they've suffered, really struggle to live in a community setting and in a family setting because of the anger and the trauma that's inside. So Audrey Grace House, through our staff, works with those kids to try to unpack that trauma and help them to be able to go on and live healthy lives.
And when you're talking about this trauma, you're saying, I mean, the stuff that people hear on the news about what's happening to kids, either drugs, sexual abuse, this is really the worst of the worst, and they're coming out of those homes, correct?
That's correct.
So you guys have people on staff 24 hours. From what I saw of our tour, there are different homes, like a group home, and these kids come together and they live together and heal together, and y'all have somebody on staff who cooks for them, takes care for them, makes sure homework, chores are done, everything like that, right?
That's correct. And you actually mentioned group homes. In some other states, they may be referred to as group homes.
Okay.
But we actually have staff, at least one staff for every 5 children, 24 hours a day, 365 days a week, or 365 days a year. So it's a much higher level of care than a traditional group home. And again, our focus within the care is providing treatment. And our staff that are with kids day in and day out there are a part of that treatment. They're part of the treatment team. But then we also have master's level counselors that are actually providing the therapy, and then working with the direct care team to have that therapy be much more than just the hour a week or whatever they may provide, so that we're working therapeutically through the week to address their needs.
The kids that you guys handle are most likely not going to be going back home, right? Is that the case? Or?
Yes and no. You know, we're beginning to learn a lot about you know, what's in the child's best interest. And obviously, if you have a situation where a parent is sexually abusive or physically abusive to a child, it's very difficult to reach a point for that parent to change their ways and really get the help they need to be able to have that child back home. So safety is always a primary concern. But in many cases, you may have parents that unfortunately have become hooked on drugs, and the drugs are affecting their parenting decisions, and at a level, once the child is removed, and we can focus through currently Child Protective Services efforts at getting the help that the parent needs so that they can become a good parent and learn how to be a good parent, sometimes those children can go home. And I would say to you that when that can happen, it's always better to place a child with their biological family. When it's not possible, the next level then is, or the next best option, is if they're extended family available, you know, aunts and uncles that they already have relationship with, that they're tied because of that kinship. Generally speaking, that's the best second option for kids. And many of our kids, actually in this area, because of the efforts of Child Protective Services, we have a much higher level of ability to place kids with kinship families or extended family members than in other parts of the state. So we've done a good job with that through our Child Protective Services.
And I'm so glad we took this tour before we have you on the show, because I want to give some people some insight into the mindset of these kids. Because when you walk in this house, in one of these homes out there, it feels like a home. I mean, when we walked in, there were kids that were watching TV, they were playing cards, there was dinner or lunch being made on the stove, and seems like there's always food out. And then we walked into the kids' rooms, and they each have their own their space and stuff that they can hang on the wall. Not necessarily what those kids came from, right?
No, not necessarily, and in many cases, those kids have never had that. They've never had a room or a space that was theirs. They've never had, oftentimes, clothes and possessions that are theirs. And it's a very specific focus of New Horizons. Even while we're providing intensive level treatment, we want kids to feel love and feel like they're in a good, safe place, and that the home we're providing for them feels like a home as opposed to an institution. It's a big part of our treatment.
Well, and one of those things that makes it feel like a home, we were told when we were there, is that there is always food out. There's always food. I mean, that's done intentionally, right?
It is done intentionally. You know, when you're dealing with a significant number of children that come from neglect, you always want them to know that no matter what, they're going to be provided for. And food is a very important part of that. You know, we always walk a fine line between the health needs of kids, how we make sure we provide healthy snacks as opposed to things that aren't healthy, but we always want them to know that if they're hungry, they're going to be fed, and they'll have options throughout the day.
We were told that sometimes when you get a new child in the home, that because there is always food out there, sometimes they will hoard until they learn that, hey, this is always going to be here for me, right?
Absolutely. You just think about that for a minute if you let your mind wonder where kids come from, really where anyone would come from, where you've been in a situation where you didn't have and you had to go without. It's a fairly natural step in the process of healing to get what you can get.
Okay. Well, when we come back after this commercial, I want to talk to you about a new initiative that you guys are working on. So when we come back in Big Country Politics, more with New Horizons CEO. We'll be right back.